We have, I guess, a couple of different views, pro-abortion and anti-abortion. If we're being as precise as possible, people who are in favor of it and people who are against it, call it what it is. And yeah, I wonder how much time have we really spent thinking about this issue? In other words, if we're online and we're posting about it, we're talking about it, I don't know. How much time have we really spent thinking about this? Because there are books, I'm talking thousands of books written about this issue. And the issues are complex and they're deep. And by the way, they're incredibly meaningful. So I think it was on the first day, I don't know if it was this class, but one of my classes, this question about humanity came up, and I asked the question, what is it to be human? And it sounds like a really tedious question, like, oh my God, come on, what do you mean, what does it mean to be human? Well, that matters. Because all of a sudden, if we're talking about this issue, what it is to be a human suddenly matters. Because there's one of two things going on. If people who are against abortion, they believe that what you're aborting is a human being. And that means that according to them, we're murdering tens of millions of human beings every year. Hitler's got nothing on us, man, if it turns out that those are human beings. People who are in favor of abortion, they don't think it's a human being. They believe it's tissue. And that's all that you're getting rid of. And if that's the case, then what are we so angry about? This is a very difficult bridge to gap. Difficult gap to bridge here. Because it's very difficult to bridge. Because how do you separate that? Well, first off, I guess you would solve the problem by if we could come to an understanding of what it is to be a human. So that really silly, tedious question from before, what's a human, all of a sudden it matters. There's a really neat philosopher. I'll reference him several times throughout the years. His name is Diogenes. And Diogenes was a Greek, and he wrote nothing down. And his whole philosophy was lived through his life. But he was such a fascinating character that people just wrote about him, and they would talk about the things that he would do. And one of the things that he did was, you've ever heard of the philosopher Plato? If you haven't, you'll certainly hear lots about him throughout this year. Plato was at his academy, and he was trying to come up with a definition of what it is to be a human. And his definition was a featherless biped, something that walks on two legs and has no feathers. And this was one of the greatest philosophers to ever live. This was his definition. This is all he could come up with for a definition. So Diogenes used to troll Plato all the time. He didn't like Plato. So he went and got a chicken, he plucked all the feathers out of the chicken, and he would follow Plato around, and he would hold up this featherless chicken and say, behold, it's Plato's man. Because that's the best he could come up with, a featherless biped. Chicken walks on two legs, it's got no feathers. And so we've been trying for thousands of years something so simple as what is it to be a human has eluded us. And then we thought maybe with the discovery of DNA, maybe that would be helpful for us. But that's when all of a sudden these things start to matter. Because the question now becomes, if you haven't really thought too much about this issue, and I'm going to suggest that most of us probably haven't. No, why are we so up in arms about this issue? How can we have such deeply held beliefs? Well, it's probably not about that thing itself. It's probably about this thing here. We want to side up with our friends. We want to be on the same side with other people. We want to be on, whatever it is that we seem to think is the mainstream idea. We want to be in conjunction with that. If most of our friends are on Instagram and they're posting these things, these nonsensical things, we want to be on that side because we don't want anybody to think badly about us. And then so we just kind of blurt these things out, And we will oftentimes we're going to project something really horrible onto the other side. Like I was talking about last time, it's worth considering what those monsters are that we're projecting. People who are in favor of abortion, they just want to murder babies, right? They wake up in the morning and they're like, how do we murder tens of millions of babies? That's what they do, right? And people who are against abortion, they wake up in the morning, they're like, how can we control women's bodies? That's what happens, right? It's stupid. We characterize the other side like that. If someone who's in favor of abortion, they're not waking up in the morning saying, how do I murder babies? They're waking up in the morning and they're considering other things, very few of which are probably have anything to do with this. And when they do think about this, they're probably thinking about it in terms of there's this tissue and it's creating terrible things for a person's life. It's creating hardship. How can we relieve the suffering of the people who are having to deal with this? It's probably what they're thinking. And then the people over here, they're not waking up in the morning saying, how do I control people's bodies? They're not seeing it that way. They're waking up in the morning and they're thinking, well, first off, they're probably not even thinking about this. And when they are thinking about this, what they're probably thinking about is, God, it's a baby, it's a human. How can we save its life? This is what it is. And so, both sides are approaching it from a perspective that's admirable. These are people who are trying to make people's lives easier. These are people who are trying to save the lives of what they think of as being babies. Neither side is evil on this. It's easy for us to characterize it and just say, oh, you've got the worst intentions, you've got the worst intentions. But those aren't their real intentions. But that's what makes it easy for us to attack them. If we deal with their real intentions, well then, shoot. What if they're right? Oh, no, they can't be right. I've made too many Instagram posts for them to be right. I've shared too many posts for them to be right. We have to find a way, because we have to hold on to that view. So it begs this question, why is holding on to that view so important to us? And it's a psychological thing, man. None of us, as I said before, none of us sees the world the way that it really is. We see the world the way that we are. And the way that we construct meaning in the world, it works for us. If we see certain people in certain ways, we see situations in certain ways, and so far, at your age right now, it's kept you alive this long. And it's comfortable, because it's your worldview. But now, if someone comes along and says, man, that thing is wrong, that's what it really is. Yeah, it's pride, but there's something that's even deeper than that. And this pride thing right here, it talks about the need to be right, because it talks about how we feel like we need to be on top. We have to kind of dominate everything else. We have to be right, everybody else has to be wrong. I have to be good because everybody else is evil. I have to be this because everybody else is that. It's this dichotomization where we separate things out into things better and worse, or in our case, is good and evil for everybody else. Now, there is good in the world, and there is evil in the world. These things do exist, but they're probably not found so simply as that. But it works for us. It makes the world simple. It makes it easier for us to digest. And again, when I say that, I'm not saying it's a terrible thing. I'm saying it does make the world manageable for us. And if you're going to engage in these kinds of discussions and these kinds of ideas, it's complicated. It is difficult. When we're trying to figure out what it is, for example, to be a person, to be a human being, it's not easy. It's not easy. When we talk about, well, they're trying to control women's bodies. No, they're not. They're trying to control what they think is a fetus's body. The fetus is not a woman's body. It's different, completely distinct. It's a stupid argument. It's a stupid claim. But it's easy for us to digest. Oh, well, they're trying to murder children because they worship the devil. Seriously? You think they wake up in the morning and they worship the devil and they want to have the blood of children on altars? Seriously? That's how you dichotomize the world? It's no wonder. I was just reading a study here about fear, and it was indicating, essentially, if you're interested, it was talking about young Americans, people in general, Americans generally. 54% of Americans say that they feel a type of existential fear at least once a day. In other words, people walk around terrified. And the younger that we are, teenagers to early 20s, I think the number was 74%. Well, no wonder we think the world's such a dangerous, scary place, because we're constantly being fed these dichotomies. Well, if you're on our side, right? Yeah, I hope so, because those people are evil. They're out to get you. You think it's an incredibly narcissistic view. I wake up every day thinking that the world is against me. I'm that important that the world has to focus its attention and anger towards me. Well, I mean, it makes me feel important, so I guess there's a value that's there. There's something that's prideful that's there. But there's something that's even deeper than that that's happening down here. And I would suggest to you that that's the thing that most of us are lacking. That's why we pursue things as heavily as we do. It's just one word. It's not a complicated word. It's a simple word, but it has a lot of implications. Meaning. We want meaning. We want to feel like our lives matter in some way. And if I feel like the world is against me, well, then suddenly I matter. If I can find myself on one side or the other in something like this, then suddenly I'm important. I matter. I've joined myself to a bunch of other people. It's one of the reasons that we join up with groups generally. We join political parties because it makes us connected to somebody else, because intuitively you understand that you are just one human being out of 7.5 billion on this planet. And intuitively you understand that if you were to die today, we would have some Instagram posts about you, and many of us would make it about us, and we just talk about how close we were to you, even if we only met you once or twice in the hallway. But that within days or maybe weeks at the most, suddenly your memory would pass off, and it would be like you were never here in the first place. And this is true about a lot of people. We understand, we want to feel like we matter, because we don't feel like we matter. So one of the ways that we try to find meaning in our lives, whether we try to feel like we matter, is by joining ourselves to groups, one side or the other, one view or the other, us versus them. Even if it just means joining a political party, even if it means cheering for a sports team and wearing jerseys. It joins us to a group and makes us feel like we matter just a little bit more. You know? And that's only because we lack an understanding that we do matter, and that there is meaning there. But finding it is going to be very difficult. It's very challenging. Many people never do, which is one of the tragedies of life, really. So when Pascal is talking about here that our problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone, what's the danger of sitting in a room alone? Shit. It's thinking about the things that we're talking about right now. You know? It'd be an interesting thing to consider about yourself. Really think about it. When is the last time that you were able to sit quietly and think about something? I mean, like without grabbing something to play music or to watch something. Like how much actual mental downtime do we have that allows us to consider deep ideas, or to consider meaning, to consider purpose? You know? And it's not a criticism. When I say stuff like that, people think it's a criticism. It's absolutely not. It really is worth considering, because if you don't have much downtime, how deeply can you be invested intellectually in one view or the other? And that means for it doesn't have to be just this one issue, but that's the one that came up. In any issue, how deeply can you think about something? And if you don't think deeply about something, then that means that nothing can have deep meaning for you. And if you're going through life and nothing has deep meaning for you, then what you're ultimately doing is leading a meaningless life. And it isn't anything that a person would recognize right now. But don't you know any older people who are really bitter and hostile and complaining all the time, and they're angry? A lot of it stems from this. Also, the constant need to give advice to people comes from this as well. Advice is a lot of times, I mean, unless it's asked for. If it's asked for, you should give advice when you're asked for it. If you're not asked, you shouldn't be giving it. But you'll notice from the tone a lot of times, think about how people give you advice. Do they say it in a loving way, like they really want the best for you? Or are they saying it in an angry way? You shouldn't be, you know? If people are giving you advice from an angry tone, I don't know. I don't know if they want the best for you. Or if they're angry because they missed the boat at some point earlier in life. And they're almost like wishing they're passed on to you in some way. If we can't sit quietly and consider ideas, then it'd be worthwhile to consider what it is that we're trying to actually get away from, such that we have to fill our heads with noise. Maybe it's the consideration of these deep ideas, or maybe it's the consideration of, I don't know, maybe there's a terror of death that sits inside of you, that when you sit alone, and maybe that's where your thoughts start to go. You know, late at night when the room is dark, and you're thinking about, I wonder if this is what it's like to die. You pass off into consciousness, and all of a sudden it's gone. Or is there something else on the other side? And eternity is a long damn time, let me tell you. It's longer than a math class, which already feels really, really long, even if it's only 2 hours. Even if it's longer than this talk, which has only been 15 minutes. And so, it's worth considering. What is the thing that we're afraid of engaging? And whatever the thing that we're afraid of engaging, I would suggest to you that that's probably the thing that you need to engage. Because the things that you want to find are probably going to be found in the places that you least want to look. If you wanted to look, you'd find the answers to these things already. But if we're not finding the things that we're looking for, it's probably because we're looking in the wrong place. We're looking in the obvious places. You know, you have to look in the places that people least likely want to go. But that's what makes a person wise, being willing to do that, and courageous, of course. It doesn't take any courage at all to look for the problems. I mean, if you look for the problems in the world, where are the problems in the world? Well, they're all out there. That's an easy place for me to look. I can jam my hands in my pockets and scowl and mess with my feet and just go, people are so terrible. And we'll say really stupid shit like, you know, we don't deserve dogs. dogs are so sweet, we don't deserve them. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe it's the problem, maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's the people that you hang out with. It's so easy to criticize the rest of the world, but it's so hard to look at myself and say, I'm doing the exact same things I'm complaining about other people doing. But it's different, because I'm doing it for good reasons. Everybody else is doing it because they're terrible and they're evil. You know, the problem with I hear people complain like, oh my God, people are so stupid. And I like to ask people that question, what's the last book you read? How much time have you spent this week thinking about deep ideas? Because you're really good at telling the world how stupid they are. How much time have you spent this week improving yourself intellectually? But that's different. Not all wisdom is found in books. That's true. But it's also not found in your head, unless you're thinking about it. You have to find it. You know, wisdom is a person who loves a warrior. It only comes to you when you seek it out. Finding, you know, if wisdom was just everywhere, then everybody would find it. And that tells you if you're not seeking it, then you're not finding it. You know, no one is wise by chance. Nobody is wise just by birth. We have to seek these things out. And so maybe before we spend our time complaining about the other side, we should consider our own side and consider our own motives. Maybe before we want to criticize all the structures of the world, maybe we should look at the structures of our own life. Is anybody in here drinking as much water as you should? No. Anybody in here getting enough rest? Eating what you should be eating? Right. Getting enough exercise? Everybody here studying as much as we should? I don't think any of us are in this room. That's myself included, of course. And so maybe the first thing we should do is to fix ourselves before we try fixing the rest of the world. Maybe it's important for us to sit in a room and understand the things about ourselves that we could improve. And then starting out in the process of improving them. And then I think what you're going to find is if you spend all that time improving yourself, well, you're not going to have time to focus on everybody else. You're too busy improving yourself, and maybe that's the best way to improve the world. Yeah. Maybe my life goal is to have one less stupid person in the world, which is myself, to seek wisdom. You know, so that way at least I'm not making things worse. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Happy Tuesday.